And thanks for joining this morning's webinar on Kentico Technical Learning, where we're going to take a look at responsive design as well as some of the other options that are available when developing mobile applications. I appreciate everyone joining this morning. We have a really great turnout, which I think is kind of really important to think about, especially with the growth of mobile today. So if you're not familiar with me, my name is Thom Robbins. I'm Kentico's Chief Evangelist, and hopefully we'll provide you with some fantastic information this morning that you can go back and take advantage of. As always, we try to record everything, and I'll definitely make slides available and that kind of thing. Certainly if you have questions, please feel free to send them in. I'll do my best to answer them at various points. But certainly, if I don't get to them, feel free to send me an email or shoot me over something on Twitter. So, a couple of things, and I want to spend a second kind of talking about the rise of mobile and some of the things that you really do want to think about as you're building out mobile applications. So, I know a lot of people, myself included, when I talk to customers, I would hear, oh, well, several years ago, mobile was part of phase 2, and now we're hearing things like mobile first or mobile is something that we want to do and we expect it to be part of the initial rollout. And it is pretty interesting when you start looking at a bunch of the stats. I found this infographic which provides some of the basic stats, and I'm sure there are people that could argue over whether the stats are right or not, but they are pretty startling, and if you start looking across multiple planes, the stats are pretty close. I mean, the amount of mobile penetration in the world today is pretty startling, with the growth coming pretty heavily from areas like China and India, where the infrastructure is just starting to catch up. And I know, for example, in the U.S. we have hard lines in the ground, which has really been one of the big issues with cell, but we're starting to see that growth pick up as well. The amount of apps, and I read something the other night which really talked about people do a lot of their work on the internet or playing on their cell phones or using their cell phones or using the mobile intranet using apps a lot more than they would if they were just browsing, which is kind of a real fantastic opportunity for folks like Kentico as well as app developers out there, because it means that there's a whole new generation of apps that we can build and that we can leverage for our customers and then either monetize them or make them part of some other campaigns that we're doing. Obviously the growth of mobile also has helped Google as well as mobile ad revenue, which is pretty interesting if you look across a pretty broad spectrum. And as developers, we can leverage mobile networks to help monetize that infamous free app, and as a way of kind of providing money for that. Also, the fact that a lot of these searches and a lot of the things that you're seeing on Google tend to be very local, which is kind of interesting as you think about how you're going to build your app and what kinds of things you may want to do within your app. And then lastly is kind of the big battle that's happening out there, right? What's the predominant platform, and who do you want to target your application for, which has a lot to do with the things that we're going to talk about as we move forward. So I think the rise of mobile is definitely pretty startling, and I think the iPhone had a lot to do with it. It definitely helped to move a lot of that growth. And then the question is really, what other platforms are out there besides iPhone, like Android, and you're now seeing some of the Microsoft, Windows start to take off as well. So for our agenda today, kind of giving all the thought that there was in everything going on, I tried to provide a bunch of sites, and I know, or a bunch of different scenarios, and kind of focus on those. And the thing to understand, I think, about responsive web design is it's not the only solution, but it is one of these solutions, and it's really become the preeminent solution that's out there. But I did think it's important to spend a few minutes with Kentico CMS 7 as well as some of the other technologies that are out there to provide the feature functionality and things that you can do within the development world at large, and how you can start to think about leveraging a lot of those different scenarios that you're seeing here. So before I go ahead and I go much further, what I would like to do is pop up a little poll here and take a look at how many people in the audience are actually looking at sending out or in the process of doing a responsive web design project. So if people could go ahead and fill out the poll, that would be fantastic. All right, great. So it's kind of an interesting mix. We have about 30% that are doing it right now, 15% about 60 days out, 30% in the next 6 months, and about 22% sometime in the future, and then a smaller percentage really just trying to understand it. So as you can see, it's pretty balanced, in the different areas that we're trying to take a look at. So I do want to make sure that we provide as much information as we can to make it easier for people to figure out what they want to do. So let's go ahead and hop into it here and go ahead and get started. The biggest thing that I think we want to start with is what happens when you're looking at a mobile project. You need to go through a set of decisions, and those decisions are going to be how you think about your project, because things like responsive web design, as an example, does require upfront planning. And there are other choices as well, but these are all things that I think we need to really focus on. So here's a set of starter questions, and I kind of drew these from partners at Kentico as well as my own experience in how I think about what mobile projects look like. I mean, obviously, the biggest thing is you want to look at your current mobile statistics. And this will give you an idea of the kinds of devices and the kind of percentage of traffic that you're seeing, and will help you kind of figure out what that timeline and the infamous budget looks like. If you're seeing a tremendous amount of mobile traffic, or you're trying to build out, a mobile, more of a local mobile presence, for example, and you want to see that increase, that obviously helps you to look at what your current traffic is and then start to set up kind of those goals moving forward. And then things like target audience and target platform are huge. What are you trying to drive for the people that are hitting your site? And last is the infamous application features and functionality. And we're going to spend hopefully a few minutes at the end looking at what I call application stores, which are really the idea of building either native applications or HTML5, the new hybrid applications. And then last is the idea of the developer skills. And this is something that becomes really, really important as you think about not only your timeline and budget, but what you need to do to get your application out. And these are just kind of a set of starter questions that I think everyone should think about. And I know some partners have this as part of their initial discovery, and it is something that I always ask whenever I start a project, as far as what kinds of questions that I want to get from my customer. So let me go ahead and hop out of here. Well, one of the big things I do want to point out, if you're using EMS today, you can actually take a look at your current mobile traffic. So let me go ahead and bring in Kentico. So I'm running Kentico CMS 7 here, as you can imagine. Let me go ahead and log in here and give it a second while it's warming up. So what I do want to show is where you can go ahead and take a look at the web analytics that currently exist if you're not familiar with it. So if you hop into Kentico CMS 7 and then click the Online Marketing tab and then select Web Analytics, there's a bunch of web analytics reports that are available. One of those is the mobile devices, and I'm running some sample data here because it's on my local machine. But as you can see, it provides the number of reports the number of mobile devices that have hit, and I'm generating sample data here, as well as whether it's a mobile visit, as you can see here, and then the actual mobile device that exists down here. So it tells you kind of the percentages and things that are there. I do also want to point out, if you're not aware of it, that you can go ahead and subscribe to this kind of data in version 7. And there's kind of as you're building out your project, you do want to kind of think about maybe there are things you're doing or that you have an interest in, to see who's hitting it. And things like subscriptions will help because you can have it sent out. You can also leverage the set of conditions, which is a new feature within version 7. So you can really kind of start to leverage a lot of that feature functionality to go ahead and start getting at that report data that exists as you figure out what kind of report or mobile activity you're actually getting hit with in your site that's coming along. The other is if you're currently not running Kentico EMS and you're using Google, I do want to make sure that you understand that you can go into Google Analytics, as you can see here, and you can find on your Analytics tab under the Audience area, you have your mobile, then your overview, and I have your device images here, your device here, so you can see the amount of data. The amount of numbers that are available. It's the same kind of data that you would see in Kentico CMS. I just got a question about how close are the numbers between Google Analytics and Kentico CMS 7. They're close. I mean, they should be identical. There obviously is some differences, that are there. But the big thing is these two numbers should be close, and it really becomes a question of what you're looking at. I think it is kind of interesting that Google Analytics does provide the picture of the picture of the devices. I'm not sure how valuable that is, but it is kind of interesting. So as you can see here, you can also look at the mobile traffic within Google. So let's go ahead and, sorry, I made a mistake there. There we go. All right, so now that you kind of start looking at, you've started getting answers to the questions that you need, you have several choices that you need to make. And this is where things like responsive design, mobile subsite, your native and your hybrid apps. And I want to kind of make it clear that when you think about how you're going to build an application, I know it's great to say, I'm going to build everything as responsive, but you really need to go through that discovery phase initially to make sure that you're starting to build out that data correctly and you're providing obviously what will make sense for the customer. Or for your own site. And there's a couple of obviously benefits and drawbacks that you want to think about. When we look at things like either the mobile subsite, you want to think about this as you end up with two separate site maps, which certainly could be okay. If you're looking at building out something quickly and you already have an existing site. Responsive design is fantastic, right? It solves a lot of our issues and kind of provides that single screen to rule everything. The big thing is you do want to keep in mind that there is a set of complexity that we're going to get into in a few minutes, and there is an upfront planning process that you have to go to make it successful, and it is something that you want to think about. The other, and when you kind of move from the web into this idea of application stores, which is what I'm calling it, is where you build the idea of a native or a hybrid application. And I know things like HTML5 applications kind of fit across this scheme, but what you want to think about is what you're looking at doing, right? Do you want that application or that application to run on the device? And I often think about it as, things like WebGL or high-end gaming, you do have to build that native application. The good part is that you can leverage things like offline to take advantage of making things like the native or hybrid applications. The thing I do want to point out is that there's a lot of different tool sets out here, and there's kind of a whole webinar in building native versus hybrid applications that if you're interested in, I'm certainly happy to put that together, because there's a couple of big decision points that are in there, right? What applications you're targeting, or excuse me, what platforms you're targeting, what your tool set is, what your distribution. Obviously, things like native and hybrid give you access to the application store. So being able to post your app in the iTunes or in Android store has a lot of power, especially if you're looking at monetizing it and how you think about it. The thing that I do want to call out is, and I put this slide together as a way of showing the relative complexity, which then always starts to drive into the relative cost that becomes important. So as you think about what the mobile subsite is, it's built in. So for example, within Kentico CMS 6 or 7, there's no extra cost. You're actually building on top of your existing environment. There is the drawback, though, that you have 2 separate sitemaps. So the cost is relatively simple. It is relatively simple to test because it doesn't require anything new. There's no new processes that have to be there. You have your existing site. Kind of the middle of the road is things like responsive design, right? So the cost goes up a little bit in relation to a mobile subsite, but there is upfront planning and complexity changes, and this can have a huge impact if you already have an existing site with lots of pages that you need to think about. And this is a complexity where your costs can go up exponentially. You do need to think about testing processes, as you'll see in a few minutes, right? Because you're testing for devices or device groups, and you do want to kind of think about how you're going to do that to make sure that that app runs in a specific device group, whether it's iPhone, 300 pixels or 800 pixels. And then, last is this idea of application store. As you can see, it kind of goes up, from a cost perspective as well as a time. And obviously this time is relative. But you do want to think about, when you get into application stores, there's new testing, there's new infrastructure, there's a new process that's required, there's new skills. So that cost tends to increase quite a bit. So the other big thing, too, from a general perspective is this idea of kind of general requirements is what I call them. It's thinking about, is it readable? So when you roll out your website, can you see how it reads in different widths? Are things visible, right? It's kind of annoying on a mobile device to have to scroll left and right. We want to try, just like on the web, to make sure on my desktop that people aren't scrolling all over the place, but then to provide even less scrolling on a smaller screen, which generally means you want to bring everything down. And then, is it usable? Right, and these are the requirements checklist that I usually apply everything against as I go ahead and I start to build out a mobile application and provide a way for people to use that application. So let's talk about getting started, and this tends to be how we think about things like responsive web design. So when we look at responsive web design, we tend to think about different browser or pixel sizes. And, obviously it's not as nice to have, a set of, mobile devices on our desk. We do want to think about using our browser, and you do end up spending a lot of time. Let me go ahead and open this up. You do spend a lot of time kind of changing your size. So as you can see in the slide, there's a bunch of different tools that you can purchase that you can download, not purchase, download to make it easier. I happen to be running Firefox, as you can see here, and if you look in the bottom right, you can see that it actually will show my specific pixel size or viewport size that's showing up here as a way of making it easier. And as I kind of make it smaller or larger, you'll notice that it changes around. And this is one of the nice things, right? So as a developer, as I build out applications, I tend to spend a lot of time looking at things in various sizes, and this kind of helps me move along. The other is, let's hop back in here. The other thing is, I don't know, obviously it depends on kind of your, oh, there we go. There we go. The other thing is, as you look at kind of other places that are out there, there are some pretty nice sites that you can leverage out on the web to take advantage of things that are there. And these are kind of homegrown sites. They're sites that people went ahead and built. Let me go ahead and bring one up here so that you can see what it looks like. That one does the bookmark. Let me go ahead and this one, the Studio Press one. Sorry, I didn't mean to close that. There we go. So what this one does, and I'm not kind of endorsing these or one versus the other, but I know that there's several of them out here, is the idea that you can look at things in different sizes. So this is kind of nice. So for example, let's go ahead and do Microsoft.com here. There you go. So as you can see, if we look at Microsoft.com, which is responsive, which we'll look at in a few minutes, you can see that I see things differently at different resolutions, and I can do kind of width only. I can do device sizes to kind of build that out. So this is a small phone, and you can see what's there, an iPhone, so I can kind of, scroll down. And you'll notice that I've got some different things that are starting to happen that we'll look at in a minute. So there's a lot of solutions out there like this that as you get started building this out, that I definitely would tell people to take a look at. Both of these I've used. They're pretty easy to use. They're both free. Certainly, these are ones that I know about. Please send me a question in the pane or a chat if you have other places that you would recommend people take a look at. As you start to build these out, and I know there's quite a few of them out there. So let's actually hop a little bit into Kentico CMS. So the thing I do want to point out is, as you think about mobile applications, Kentico CMS 7 provides a variety of new features that we're going to kind of mix in through here as we talk about building responsive web design and things that I do want to make sure people are aware of. One of the biggest ones is this idea of device profiles. So Kentico, we integrated with 51 Degrees Mobi as part of version 7. And this provides a couple of new features, as you can see here. And what device profiles are fantastic for is that it allows you to manage devices in a set of categories, which means you can start to break them down. And that becomes really important as, especially as you think about responsive web design and managing the broadest group of device categories as possible to get the broadest coverage. The other is, as content administrators, I want to make sure that I provide, an easy way for, as a developer for my content administrators, I want to provide as easy a way as possible for my content administrators to be able to see what their site would look like on a specific mobile device. So let's actually kind of hop into this here. Let me move some of this over. Give myself some additional room here. All right. So let's go into, first thing is, let's take a look at Site Manager so that you can actually see how this gets activated. So let's go into development here. And let's select device profiles. So this is the actual device. I'm sorry. This is a device profile. Let's take a look at settings first, just so that you can see it. When you install Kentico CMS 7, I did want to point this out kind of quickly. You want to go into settings and content management, and you want to turn these on. By default, they're not actually turned on. So you do want to go ahead and turn those on. So if you're running CMS 7 and you're saying, hey, I'm not seeing some of the menus that I'm showing, you do want to make sure that you go in and you turn these on. So once they're turned on, you can hop over to development and you can look at device profile screen. The device profile screen, when the site visits your, when your visitor hits your site, this is the list and the categories of devices that they're actually going to run through. And this is fully extensible, meaning I can go ahead and add a new profile. We ship with some of the basics that's here, and I just want to kind of take a second and show you some of these. So as you can see, well, actually, let's go back here and take a look at this one. So as you can see, when I select the profile, you'll notice I get my display name, I get my preview width, I also get my device name. I can specify user agent as a way of pulling this through. I can also identify the themes that are going to be used, and then layout mapping that we're going to talk about in a little bit later, which is one of the features of Kentico CMS 7. The real value of this, when I turn this on for example, an end user, is if I go over to my content tab. So you'll notice that I see the home screen here. You'll also notice that I now have a new menu that appears, and this is this is my device, and this actually ties back to the list of devices that you saw there. So by default, I'm using the default, which is my screen that well, you can't see it here, but it's my desktop screen. If I was a content administrator and I said, hey, I want to see what this looks like within an iPad, I can select that, and then I can either do a preview or a live site. I'll give this a second, and you'll notice that, gee, what happens? It renders my device in the actual viewfinder that's here. And you can go ahead and, as I said, you can modify or add in, and these are basically images that you add in that kind of get pieced together. You're in First has a great example of adding in the Windows mobile phone available on his blog. And if anyone needs a pointer, please feel free to send me an email as well, and we can definitely point you at that. So the kind of value here is that I can see what my site will look like as it gets rendered. The other thing is I can also select the rotate, and you'll notice that this kind of rotates, and it gives me both landscape and portrait that's out there. And look, I can also do it for the Android device that's here. Give it a second. There we go. And you can see the Android device that's out there, and I can kind of rotate the device. I mean, it's a very nice feature for our content administrators to be able to see what their application or their page will actually look like within the viewfinder. And as you'll see in a few minutes, Kentico really starts to take advantage of a lot of those. Now, the big thing I did want to point out, too, is that a lot of this, the 51 Degrees Mobi, we integrated with their kind of free version, and there is a more advanced version that you can get, is all pulling from an XML file. So let me go ahead and pull this up here. Is all pulling from an XML file that's in your installation directory under App Data, CMS Modules, Device Profile. And as you can see, it's got kind of the log file, which is where it's checking, and it's the devices.xml that's actually kind of key to this. Let me go ahead and open this up. There you go. So you can see kind of the list of XML that's pulling. So you get kind of all of these built in, and it is something that you can start to take advantage of. And what 51 Degrees Mobi really brings to the table is that they figure out what the valid user agents are. And if you've ever worked with user agents, they're not standardized. They become very difficult to manage. There's a lot of different intricacies within that, and 51 Degrees Mobi kind of helps solve that problem. If you're interested in more information, we do have a webinar in, I believe, early January with 51 Degrees Mobi, where we're going to be talking about kind of their integration piece of this. So let's continue on here. So that's kind of one of the things for content administrators. The other that I do want to point out is depending on how you're developing your application, I do want to kind of point out a couple of things within Google Chrome. And I seem to have shut it down here. Within Google Chrome that I do think has some real validity as, there we go. As people, let me open this up here. There we go. That I do want to make it easier for people to understand. Google Chrome has a fantastic set of developer tools. One of the pieces, let's go ahead here. One of the pieces of Google Chrome is this idea of developer resources. So I hit Control-Shift-J, and then you'll notice that I can select settings, and it might be hard to see, and I apologize, down here on the bottom right. And you'll notice that this brings up a user agent. So this allows me to select a set of user agents that I can run. So for example, right now this is expecting itself to be, it is presenting the Internet Explorer 9 user agent. You'll notice that if I click on this, there's a bunch of other user agents. So if I go ahead and I say, well, let's make this an iPhone 5, and then let's go ahead and refresh this here. You'll notice what happens. It presents the iPhone 5 user agent string, and oh look, our page responds differently. So it went from kind of the full page down to what presents. This is another kind of great way of being able to look at user agents and being able to see how your site is actually going to present at different resolutions, at different user agent strings. All right, so let's go ahead and close this down. And I would recommend taking a look at Google Chrome. I actually think they have a really nice set of tools that makes it easier for developers to kind of figure things out. Okay, so mobile subsites. I do want to spend a minute or two on this, especially as you think about responsive web design. We do have a lot of people that, as phase 2, they're going to move to responsive web design because of the planning, but you can immediately leverage kind of rolling out this idea of mobile subsites. Kentico has had the mobile redirection web part, I think, since version 5, but we really started bringing it to the forefront in version 6 and then in version 7. So to kind of show you how it works kind of real quickly, let me go into CMS Desk here. Let's go ahead and hit our design. And so what happens with the redirection web part is when I hit the live site, it looks at the user agent that's coming in and it says, hey, do you fall into a specific set? And then based on that set, what do I want to do? And as you can see, we have our mobile redirection web part here. Let me go ahead and configure it. And you'll notice that in version 7, it offers a set of redirection settings. And this is different than you saw in version 6. So you could do things like redirect what we call small and large, right? So keeping that whole metaphor of managing groups of devices, or you can redirect specific sets. So, for example, I want to redirect Android, or I can make it fall into a specific set of devices. So, a a very nice feature. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, the downside here is that I end up with 2 sitemaps, which if you're really only looking at building, you know, a couple of pages that you need to have available on your you know, on your mobile site, content redirection is really a fantastic feature. And then you also have the, you know, show main screen site web part, which will allow you to kind of toggle back and forth. So some good information there and things for you to think about. I do want to spend a second talking about kind of a scenario that spans both, which is jQuery Mobile. jQuery Mobile gives you obviously jQuery, and then they've added in some of those mobile features. What I think is interesting about jQuery is that it takes the HTML5 semantic markup and makes it a lot simpler. So here's an example of a jQuery page. Let me pull this up. So as you can see, what I've done is I've got the semantic markup, HTML5, and I've created my title, and you can see that I'm kind of pulling in the jQuery mobile pieces, which is built on jQuery. But what they've done is they've taken this idea of being able to create data role as a page, and they've added in semantic markup so that when I run it, it becomes a mobile app, and they're handling things like responsive design, which is kind of nice. Let me go ahead and start this one. All right, so simple, very simple page, as you kind of see here, and you'll notice a couple of things. As I move my page around, it responds, right? Meaning I'm not cutting stuff off, it's stretching out. It's not a very attractive application, and you can actually put the Get Kentico CMS down as a footer. I do want to kind of call that out. I just actually didn't implement it. But you'll notice that I didn't do a whole lot of stuff, and as I kind of move my browser around, you'll notice that it changes. Where it gets kind of really interesting is when you get a little bit more advanced. So once again, what I did is I basically took the page that you just saw and I added in things like what they call their data role list view, and then added in some LI tags, which gives us menuing structure. So once again, let's go ahead and run this, and you can see, I think, the power that comes with jQuery Mobile and the things that you can do with it, right? So not having written any dynamic page controls here other than a very simple semantic markup HTML, you'll notice that, gee, I have, you know, a very nice set of menus that are here, and I would need to obviously go back in and hook these up. What's nice is I have search built into it, right? And I didn't actually write anything for it. There's a lot of power, I think, within jQuery Mobile that leverages the jQuery core and then allows me to expand that out. So one of the things that I did want to ask is, we are talking a lot about mobile and responsive web design as we move forward. I would love to get some feedback if anyone is interested in having a webinar on jQuery Mobile. So you should have a poll on your screen that will go ahead, and if you can answer. All right. Well, there we go, 7%. Okay, so what it looks like, we had 80% yes, 7% no, and 14% not sure. So it sounds like we definitely should go ahead and put together a jQuery Mobile webinar. But it is definitely, there's a ton of power in jQuery, and then think about connecting that. But once again, it's an important part of one of the many options that you can use to build mobile sites. And let's hop into our next section, which is really this idea of responsive design. So first thing, what responsive design is it? And I've read a lot of stuff on it and gotten a lot of emails. Responsive design is not a single technology, and I kind of want to make that really important. It's not a checkbox in Kentico. It's not a magic formula. It's not a quick fix. It is a set of technologies that will help you build a site that responds differently based on browser widths and that kind of thing. But I do want to kind of call that out, that it is something that does require planning up front. If you're not familiar with responsive design was actually created by a gentleman by the name of Ethan Marcotti. If you look up Ethan, he's got a great blog post on a list apart where he actually started kind of the idea of what is responsive design. And then he went ahead and wrote a book for the list apart, or excuse me, a book apart, which is part of list apart, on responsive web design, which I think it's a very quick read for those of you that are interested in it, and definitely something that I would recommend that you spend some time building it out. Really, what is responsive design? Well, it's a set of ideas and design patterns that really control things like fluid layouts, fluid images, and media queries. So the idea is that one web page will respond across multiple different devices. So whether I'm running on my desktop or I'm running on my iPhone or my Android device or my tablet device, that same page will behave differently and show me different things. So as you can see, there is upfront planning, and it really is a combination of technologies, CSS, HTML, at its core. How do you think about, what applications, or excuse me, what content you want to show? Because obviously, my desktop here, which is a widescreen, I can show 3 columns. Whereas on my iPhone, I can only show kind of 1 column. So you have to kind of think that out. There is a great article I found where Google is starting to recommend responsive design for better SEO. And it was kind of it's not surprising, but Google is really starting to push that out. So we did look at the Microsoft.com site. I would recommend taking a look at Kentico's partner, Eccentric Arts, who did a great webinar a while ago on some of the basics of responsive design, which you can find on DevNet as well. Their website is responsive in how it's built. I did want to point out within version 7 that there is within the sample corporate site. Let me go ahead and clear out some of these screens here. You do have the capability of showing responsive design. So where this is located is if you go to examples and then you hit mobile development, you'll notice that there's a site called responsive design. Basically, this is I wouldn't call it a starter site. It kind of shows you the things that you can do to build out the application. So for example, let's go ahead and you'll notice that I have my default device here. I'm going to select, we'll select Live Site. And as you can see, let's go ahead. And as I kind of change my width, you'll notice a couple of things happen, right? So right now I'm 3 column. As I move my width in, you'll notice that I go to 2 column. And then as I move my width in again, I go down to a single column. So really what this is doing is it's responding to the size of my device, or excuse me, to the size of my window. Where it becomes interesting is, let's go ahead and select our iPhone as our default device here. And you'll notice what happens. It immediately responds as a single column. So we've gone down from 3 columns to a single column, which is kind of super important as you think about that. And then obviously as I rotate my device sideways, you'll notice that it changes as well. And if we go a little bit bigger, let's try our iPad here. You'll notice that we're now at, once again, I think it's our 3 column as well, and how it nicely fits. So it's a great example to understand kind of how responsive design works, and it's really being controlled by the CSS on the back end, which is something I did want to focus on, kind of those three components, which I think are super important to understand. So first is this idea of fluid images. Let me open this up a little bit here. So fluid images, the reality is, as designers, it's about time the pixel dies. But the thing to keep in mind is the pixel is different on every screen. It's not generally a standard unit of measurement. It can be kind of difficult. So really what responsive design, and Ethan came up with this idea of the new math, which is really, first off, looking at percentages, right? Because 80% on my screen is 80% on your screen. But how do we convert things? And this is where it becomes important. And he figured out that if he takes the target and he divides it by the context, he can end up with the result percentage, which, if you think about it, is a very simple math solution, but it is something that makes sense. So let's go ahead, and I have a couple of samples that I want to show here that I think will actually start to help that. Let me go ahead back into Visuals here, open this up. All right, so what I've done here is we start with a very simple HTML. Once again, there we go. Once again, what I've done here is I've just built a really simple HTML. You'll notice that I set the width to 960 pixels. I have our font size as 16 pixels or 1 EM, and then I basically built out, a very simple text box that's here. Highly complex set of things going on. But you'll notice a couple of things. One is, as I move this in and I change the width, what happens? I lose portions of my screen. I don't think there's anything new here that anyone hasn't seen before, which becomes the really big issue, right? That as I hit this to, on a full screen here, I'm looking at my widescreen desktop. It looks fantastic. But then as I look at it on smaller screens or older screens, I start losing portions of it, and I have to worry about kind of scrolling in different areas, which becomes a problem. So to show you kind of how the new math I was talking about works is, let's go ahead and go over to, there we go, and look at, I took this page and then made it responsive. So when I talk about this idea of target and context, when I looked at the width, you'll notice a couple of things. I set the width to 100% because I set my target was 960, excuse me, my context was 960 and my target was 960, which obviously if you divide those together you get 1 or 100%. But it is kind of important to understand, and I'm a big fan of, especially as you're converting or if I want to go back and look at someone's code, I always like to put what the pixel width is here, just so that if someone looking at it, they can see what it was, especially if someone's following me behind. So what happens now that I've actually kind of put these things in? Well, as I'm this, there we go. So you'll see that my page looks, kind of great as I've got it at, full screen. But then as I kind of pull this in, you'll notice what happens. It starts to respond, or it starts to be responsive, and then it changes so that it's only taking up 100% of the screen, which is a very nice feature in this kind of page, and that's kind of the core of how we think about fluid layouts and images. Now, of course, that's a very simple example. Let's go ahead and look at what we tend to work with, this idea of a two-column. So what I built here is probably something that I think everyone here listening to will probably has built more than once. As you can see, it's a two-column, right? So I've got my my style here. I've got containers, headers, footers. Let's go ahead and run this so that you can see what it looks like. And go ahead and make this wider. There we go. All right. So not a tremendously exciting, but you get the idea. I've got my header, I've got my main content, I've got my sidebar and my footer. Kind of a very simple design that we've all built before and thing that we've all put into Kentico. But you'll notice that obviously as I start to size this down, I'm losing portions of what's going on there. So what's happening obviously is that I've got my width and my height here, right? So I set these and they're set for pixels, and then based on how that actually renders on the screen or the device type, it gets kind of smaller and it doesn't change. It's fixed width, fixed pixel. And then as you can see, I've set kind of the widths down here. I mean, I think this is something that a lot of people have built. Then what I did is I took this and I converted it to responsive. So there's a couple of things I want to point out here. You do need to plan up front, and what I mean by that is starting to think about how you want it to look, what devices you want to control, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I've done here is as I went ahead, you can see I changed the font, and typically 1 EM, which is a unit of measure, is about 16 pixels, and I set the height to 100%. One of the things that I found is in order to get this to work correctly in IE, I had to set the height, whereas it worked fine in Chrome and Firefox. So one of those things that was kind of annoying that I had to spend some time and thinking about it. Now, you know, kind of a relative, the two columns start, I don't know, I built that in probably, 20 to 30 minutes, nothing kind of too intense. And it took me probably about 40 minutes to an hour, so kind of two times as long, which is relative to make it responsive that you see here. So, obviously that's a very kind of broad stroke, but you do want to kind of keep in mind what a lot of people in the industry are saying is responsive design planning is about 20 to 25% additional time, and I think that obviously depends on the size of the site and everything else. So, and then as you go down through the CSS here, you'll notice that I set my width and my height. You notice I have my things, and then I basically divided out when I got down to here the width and the height. The thing that I do want to call out as well is you'll notice that that's a pretty long number. And when you are starting to convert these or build these out, I basically sat here with the calculator and just calculated it and then typed the numbers in. It turns out computers really like long numbers. Humans don't. But that rounding may have an impact, and as I played with it, I started to realize kind of how much of an impact that rounding may have, and it didn't look as I wanted to on the screen. So, everyone will kind of have their different take. I'm a big fan of, letting the computer figure it out, so I actually included, as you can see here, all of the different widths and heights that got longer. So not incredibly hard to do, but it did take time to kind of go through, and then as I had to figure out why this wasn't rendering correctly in IE, let me show you what this looks like here. So as I get wider, looks fantastic, right? Continues to look great, and then as I kind of bring this down, you'll notice everything shrinking, 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 shrinking. So it's basically responding to get wider. So it is a it is a good example, I think, for people to think about. All right. So let us go ahead, and I'm going to close that down. And we'll take a quick look at this. Okay. The other kind of basic technology that people talk a lot about with the fluid layouts and images, or beyond fluids layouts and images, is this idea of CSS media queries. So if you're familiar with CSS, I think it was CSS 2, they introduced this idea of media types. The problem is they were very generic. They had, I think, print, screen, braille, and a few others. Nothing kind of really completely useful for what we're doing here. But it did kind of lay a lot of that foundation, and it's definitely something I would think about. CSS3 media queries are pretty well supported in things like Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Chrome. I do recommend, as you build things out, that you do spend the time and kind of look at what's supported within each browser. But what a CSS media query does, it allows you to target specific media or devices, and this becomes kind of important, as you see here. So for example, we have our media screen and things that we can do. Let me show you kind of a quick example of what that looks like. Let me go ahead and get some room here. And we do media queries. There we go. So here's an example of a simple media query. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm just pulling the media screen and I'm setting the max width to 600, and when the max width hits less than 600, I want to go ahead and turn things red. So not incredibly complex, but it kind of gets the point across, right? So I'm obviously greater than 600, and then I go down and you can see it happen. So it's targeting the device size. Then I went ahead and I built, and it's based on a sample from one of the sites I ran across, a more advanced example of this, and we'll certainly make this available. Let me open this up, and you'll notice that it does a bunch of things, right? As I kind of pull this down, if the viewing area is less than 600 pixels, it'll make one color. If it's larger, so it kind of gives you the idea of the things that you can do with media queries. But certainly, as you think about kind of the market, targeting specific devices becomes really, really hard. And this is why a lot of sites are actually starting to provide, and this one's a great one, different layouts. So you're grouping device together, and I would definitely recommend people take a look at this to go ahead and fill this out. The last piece I want to focus on is this idea of layout mapping, which is part of Kentico CMS 7. So responsive design really is kind of a fantastic way of looking at your overall site. The problem you run into is, as you're building out responsive design, you do have changes that happen, and you do want to go back. Where layout mapping, it allows you to replace the shared page layouts with specific layouts. So what this means is, as we go back into CMS Desk, and we do a map layout here, and let's take a look at this. You'll notice that we have kind of our standard product screen here, but then if I select things like iPhone, it allows me to select an is convertible page and say, oh, they're coming in as an iPhone, we want you to show something different, which is a very nice feature, and it doesn't require you to do any of that upfront planning or any of that upfront responsive design work. Not that we're saying you shouldn't do it, but it is something to think about. And then last is Kentico CMS 7 includes this idea of conditional layouts. And what a conditional layout does is it allows me to target specific, there we go, it allows me to target specific sets of page markups. Let me go ahead and open this up here. And I know we're almost out of time too. So I do want to point this out, that what it allows me to do, it allows me to specify what the visible device is and what I want it to happen with as a way of kind of driving these things out. All right. So last also is I just want to spend a minute to talk about how we think about responsive design. Kentico is a huge believer of it, and hopefully you see that there's a lot of pieces to it. But it does require an upfront design, and it does require you to think through what that design looks like. And it's something that we do and everyone else does. Where I do recommend people to think about mobile layouts is, as you're building out that design, can you leverage mobile layouts so that when you hit it, you don't actually have to write that responsive piece if it's not needed. So there's kind of a lot of features that become available within responsive design that you can then leverage on top of that. Last piece, and I know we're about 30 seconds over here, is just two things to think about, is really this idea of how you think about native versus hybrid applications. I am a huge fan of thinking about how you're going to build these applications. Native applications using things like C for the iPhone are fantastic. They are perfect for games, heavy WebGL, heavy applications that are going to take advantage of very specific kind of device requirements. I'm also, I've been spending a lot of time playing with a lot of the hybrid applications. So I recently have been playing with Mobi One, which as a Windows developer gives me the capability of running an iPhone emulator on my Windows machine, which I think is fantastic. They're built very heavily on top of, on top of the HTML5 core. Which I think is very good in a lot of JavaScript. I definitely would tell people to take a look at hybrid applications if they don't need to leverage kind of the WebGL or you're not targeting a specific device. You want to be a little bit broader. And as I said, things like Mobi One, PhoneGap, and there's several other, Titanium, they are all fantastic. I happen to like Mobi One recently. So with that, hopefully everyone got some great information. As always, we're going to attempt to record this and make it available, and we will have kind of more information available on our site. Definitely take a look at my blog. I've published out some kind of more detailed blog posts around the different pieces of responsive design. So kind of with that, we've got, if you have any questions, please go ahead and send them in. Let's see, I've got, well, I don't see any questions that we have in here. I got some comments, but if you have any questions, I'm going to hang around for another few minutes. Other than that, please let me know, and everyone have a fantastic rest of your day or a fantastic evening. Thank you.